right, gang, we are live, and today we have a super special guest. Most people know him as Will Flemming. I know him as Wilson Flemming, and he is on lucky number 18. What do you think about that, dude?
Is that a lucky number?
I think so.
Well, most guys think it's a lucky number when you turn 18. That's
you
a big year.
That's like the first time you can buy porn.
Yeah.
That's a big step for a lot of guys. Well, nowadays with the internet, I don't think it probably doesn't matter for them anymore.
Cigarettes,
Used to
maybe.
be.
All right, well, Travis from Nike Weightlifting will appreciate that intro today as we remind everybody that we are brought to you by Nike Weightlifting, which is better known as Athlete Performance Solution. Visit tfox66 on Instagram. Hit him up for all your Nike weightlifting gear. He is in work misery right now as he prepares for the AO Series 3.
Correct.
We just got our order of 34 singlets, 34 backpacks, 34 warm-ups. Just arrived. Danny Kane, his sidekick, is currently misplaced. Actually, I think she's back in her house now. She was part of that Texas hurricane, tornado, rainstorm. You might have heard about it?
Yeah, Waterworld, the sequel.
Yeah, pretty much. And as always, we are brought to you by Austin Cahoy of the Fighting Viking CrossFit team from Killcliff. He was actually in town last week, set up 3 or 4 times to come meet at Lift Lab.
Never did.
Well, I couldn't make it happen. I'm
No.
a busy man. I hate to say no, but it just
I mean,
it
he
wasn't
could
in the
come see
cards.
me, but he might be disappointed.
Never.
The lesser Dan is what they say.
Well then.
Just
The
kidding.
Danger Man Chronicles.
Absolutely.
Right.
But anyway, I'm excited here to have Wilson join us. Not just because of your fantastic hair,
Appreciate
but
it.
also because you are a source of inspiration for Lift Lab, whether you realize that or not. But we'll get to that in a minute. Give the folks at home that may not know you just a little brief rundown of your background and history, that Pitchfork school that you went to, all that stuff.
Okay, so I got into weightlifting. This is kind of my origin story on how I got into weightlifting, how I got into coaching. But I was a really undersized, slow, little football player when I was a sophomore in high school, and got to play varsity football at Bloomington North High School, just an hour south of here. When I was 15 years old, so I was playing varsity football. It's because a couple of older guys got injured. I knew what I was doing on the field, but I remember really distinctly before the season running a 5.2 40, having a 24-inch vertical jump.
Woo! Athleticism.
Yeah.
Fast.
And
fast.
I'm about 5'10", and I weighed 155, 160. Right?
Just a monster
Yeah.
out there on the field.
I knew what I was doing, right? I was a smart football player, so they're like, "Hey, you're playing, right? Because so-and-so and so-and-so are hurt."
You can do some stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're playing our crosstown rivals, and I'm certain, and we had lost to them for 20 straight.
Bloomington
South.
The
And they were,
fighting Rex Grossman.
yeah, well, Rex Grossman was the quarterback that year.
Just slinging it all
Yeah,
over
and
the place.
they went on to the state championship game, and I don't think they won that year, but they lost in the state championship game to Nathan Barnes' Penn
Yeah.
Crusaders or Vikings?
Nice.
Penn Knights.
Nice.
So
Brian, what is it? Fact checker.
we'll
Brian,
fact check
Yes.
that.
I feel like I should
Just
know
dub that in.
Yeah.
So they
Barnes.
lost. Anyways, it's the crosstown rival game. It's my first game starting varsity, and I was an outside linebacker. And if you ever played football, you know that there's an ISO play, and they had an all-state running back and an all-state fullback. Both guys were just monsters, and you heard about their exploits all the time. And I identified the ISO play. I'm supposed to fill the hole and meet the fullback in the hole, and so I identify it, and my linebacker's going to come over the top and make the tackle. So I'm going to go sacrifice my body and do it. And I run into the hole, and I meet the guy. And the best way to picture it is in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when they throw Jazz out the front door, right? That was me going back 5 yards, on my back, and I see the tailback running for a touchdown.
I love it.
The next day, of course, my coach, who was notoriously bad at the clicker, like forwarding, rewinding, he was on it.
Oh,
We saw it 25
couldn't mess
times in
it
a
up.
row. Just, what were we doing? Just
I
laughing.
was trying to fill that hole there, boss.
Yeah. So I asked around, and I was like, man, I need to get bigger and faster. I want to be able to play football. And so I asked around, and I find out that those two guys, their tailback and fullback, were both weightlifters, or both trained at the Hoosier Weightlifting Club, which was in the old assembly hall at IU,
Okay.
under a guy named Paul Fleshler, who was an Olympian in 1992, and Frank Exton, who was the president of USA Weightlifting, had been an Olympic team coach, world team coach, and all that kind of stuff. So I go over there and say, make me a better football player. And they say, yeah, sure, but you gotta compete in weightlifting. So at 15, I start training for weightlifting, and within a couple years, I went from that 155, 165, 240. By my senior year of high school, I was a 4.59 40, 36-inch vertical jump. Had been a junior national champion in weightlifting, state champion in track and field. Got college scholarship offers. So to me,
remarkable improvement.
Yeah, right. And it was all I did was I weightlifted 3 times a week, right? I would go over every week, 3 times a week, and train with them, snatch and clean and jerk. And obviously, I did my school weightlifting program and all that kind of stuff. But just got so much better. And so that was, to me, is that realization. Like none of these doors. I had scholarship offers for track. I got to live at the Olympic Training Center. I had some low-level scholarship offers for football. All that stuff was not going to be possible unless they had poured into me. And so that was kind of the light bulb where I was like, I want to do that. I want to coach people because I can make a high school kid into something he's not, and I got to take my first plane ride and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of the origin story where I got into coaching and got into weightlifting.
Sure. So, well, first of all, is Paul still in Bloomington?
No, Paul is out in Colorado. He went out to, he was a resident.
To the OTC.
Yeah, he was a resident coach at the OTC for a number of years with like Casey Bergner, Oscar Chaplin, all those guys. He was their coach, and now he's still coaching at Front Range Weightlifting out in Colorado.
Got it. And so you ultimately went to the pitchfork school to throw. Mm-hmm. And at that time, you were throwing, still lifting weights competitively, or were you just throwing?
Yeah, so I went out to the Olympic Training Center.
And now's not the time for humility. Like, tell us how great of a thrower you are. Like, you caught a fish this big, and you threw like a world record hammer. I don't know.
I went to the Olympic Training Center, and because I was kind of perturbed about my offers in track, right? So I had some really, really big offers, but I kind of just wanted to throw at IU. My dad had played football at IU. My brother had been a 2-time Big Ten champion in the shot put at IU. So I was like, I would like to go to IU, but they knew I was a hometown guy. They tried to get me on the hometown discount.
Ooh.
So I was like, screw it, I'm moving to the training center. So I moved out to the Olympic Training Center, and when I went out there, I was like the youngest guy there by about 6 years. So it was like there was a bunch of 23, 24-year-olds, and I had just turned 18. And so they'd be going out on the weekend, I'd be like,
sitting in your dorm.
Yeah, sitting in the dorm, like crying myself to sleep because I miss my mom, right? And so, and there were a number of other things that were going on that kind of shook up the training center in ensuing months and stuff like that. But decided, man, this isn't what I signed up for. Came back to IU, enrolled, walked on the track team ultimately, and they put me in the hammer throw, which I had been a shot putter and discus thrower in high school. And if you realize those events, those are big guys. Those are like Dan's height, but 300 pounds.
Yeah. Right.
So both you guys, look like hammer throwers. Sure. And so I'm the smallest hammer thrower. Ended up being an All-American, set the school record at IU, and competed all the way to the Olympic trials, where I was always ranked in the top 10 in the U.S.
This is hard to make that final push.
Yeah, and it was like the hammer throw in the U.S. is an interesting event because the world standard, so to go to the Olympics, you have to have an A standard. Sure. And that A standard in the hammer throw is essentially the same as if you told everybody you had to run a 9-800, right? So it's actually the top like 2 to 3%. Sure. Make the A standard in the hammer. For some reason, it's abnormally high. So I was on the verge of top 3, top 4 in the country, but that still wasn't going to get me to the Olympic Games. So I was not competing, but in college we used the Olympic lifts all the time and trained in the Olympic lifts. So in college I ended up with lifts like 145 snatch and 182 kilo clean, weighing like around 200 pounds. Right?
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to get, obviously when you went to IU, you'd never thrown the hammer. How long did it take you to get proficient?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, it's like a journey like we try to put all of our weightlifters through. Is you have to learn technique, right? Yeah, so it was just like a constant grind, like just learning the footwork, learning the turns and all that kind of stuff. Because if you go out and try and muscle it, there's a definite ceiling on how far you can throw. So the reason I got good at it was I ended up being a pretty explosive athlete, but I was technically one of the better throwers in the country. So, but it was like the first 2 years were just toiling away, and then by year 3, 4, 5 in college, I took 5 years. Year 3, 4,
Same,
5.
same.
3, 4, 5 in college. I was pretty good, right?
So I have to ask this. I told somebody one time, this was years back. We've known each other for a while now. It's going back to when I left Purdue and started out of the corner of bypass. So that's been
What, a number of years?
7-ish, 8 years ago. It's been a while. But anyway, I was going down there. I mentioned to somebody, I'm going to go down there and meet with Will Flemming. I got to ask him some questions about weightlifting and his business and things like that. Because at that time I was extremely curious. And they said, well, the guy's a fucking weirdo. And I said, coincidentally, so am I. And I was like, I chuckled. I was like, could you explain? And the story was that it wasn't anything bad. It was like, they told me that every year on January 1 at midnight, you would go out and you would throw the hammers. You want to be the first guy training.
Yeah.
Is this a true story?
Yeah, absolutely. So December 31st, January 1st, me and one of my teammates would go prop the door open at the IU field house, and we'd stick a rock in it or whatever, prop the door open, and at about 11 o'clock we'd roll over there and get our implements out because we wanted to be the last ones thrown in the previous year and the first ones the next year. So we'd have a 2-hour session of training, and I just always and that was actually probably the thing that I always thought I could handle was I thought that I could outwork anybody, right? Because starting out at where I did, like I told you guys, was not particularly good.
Yeah.
But I was like, if I work harder than everybody, then I'll at least give myself a shot. So that was always my thing. So we'd go prop the door open, we'd throw. There'd usually be a small cooler with us after the throwing.
So
right?
you're not completely saintly.
Yeah. So we'd prop it open, and there'd be a small cooler so that we could, finish up when we were done with the throwing sessions. We could imbibe in our natty light.
Absolutely. Oh man, you were in
college.
college. Yeah, I was saying you were in college. We're in a bunch of
Yeah.
Well, I commend you for that. I think that's great. There's a lot of stories in sports where people just a lot of times people just assume that you're talented and things. You're just lucky, right? But not so much.
Right.
We've seen.
Right, I mean that's
the ladder.
super common with I think Vasily Pompanov even he talked about when he was a child in Russia, he was into judo, I believe, and he was getting his butt kicked by the weightlifters.
Hated judo.
Right, hated it, and so he got his ass kicked by the weightlifters, and he's like I'm supposed to beat them because I'm the judo guy.
Yeah.
And so he went and started weightlifting, and obviously, had some success, but that's not that strange of a story. It seems.
Yeah, right.
It seems everybody comes from nothing, and they get their sand-filled weight set, and then they go at it, and then next thing you know, they're a monster.
I mean, that's the more common story.
Yeah.
Is I read Muslim Fitness. I had a sand-filled weight set. I sucked at sports. I wanted to get better at sports. And my defining moment when I knew that lifting was something that was helping me when I was around 13, and it was super cold out. I don't know if you play baseball, but in Indiana, it's in March and you're outside playing baseball. It is brutal. Every time you hit the ball, it's ugh. But I remember that I had lifted weights all winter in my garage, and I remember I went and hit a baseball, and I was like, "Holy shit! What happened?" And all of a sudden, I went from somebody that was pretty average to relatively elite.
No, that was similar. I actually was a baseball player. So my sophomore year, I was a baseball player, and so I'm lifting with the Hoosier Weightlifting Club, and we go have baseball weights, and he keeps a record board, and I'm a sophomore, and I broke every single record.
You're I got this.
Right, I broke every single record on the team, and I'm crushing the ball, and then I tell my coach, hey, I got this junior national weightlifting championship I qualified for, I'd like to go, and he was like, and it was the first day of tryouts, and he goes, and I had played JV and varsity my freshman year, so I'm like, I should be okay. And he's like, well, you're off the team if you go. And I was like, well,
thanks, asshole.
I was like, I'm gonna go, and I'll try track. So he told me that's the stupidest decision you've ever made in your life. You could be a good baseball player. And then when I won the state championship in track, he found me in the hallways and goes, hey, remember how I said that was a stupid decision? Maybe not a bad choice.
Yeah.
So.
man, I bet he feels like an ass. All right, so let's.
Well, before we move on from the hammer, and I believe there's a story that's probably never been told, but there was a time where like you and I went to throw a sledgehammer, and I believe you got beat.
So
really,
okay.
Yeah.
Let me back up a little
Right.
bit. This was so I didn't throw or anything like that in high school.
Neither did I.
My biggest regret, neither did Angel. My biggest regret, looking back on like my athletic career, is just not trying more stuff earlier. Right. Not necessarily that like any of it would have stuck, right? But obviously, being involved in strength and conditioning, there's always some part of you that likes strength sports. I had competed and tried all of them. Well, one day we were having a little discussion in the weight room, like these things happen, and we talk about throwing the hammer specifically. And when I say hammer, I mean like ball and string. Well, no. First of all, we're talking about the real one.
Yeah.
And then it was suggested that we try with an actual sledgehammer because it doesn't have any slap, right? So I don't know how that got to be. And so we took a very rudimentary lesson, okay? And I'm talking like my heels. I was not facing essentially the field. So my heels were on the edge of the ring. And I was just going to rotate over one shoulder and throw it. Like this is like the rudimentary lesson that I got. And we did it, and I got beat. And sometimes you just got to say, you know what?
Right.
You got beat.
Yep.
So thanks for not letting me forget that.
No, I just wanted to make sure because every time there's like some measure of athleticism, it's like Dan German's terrible at blah, blah, blah.
Not a ball sport guy.
Not a ball sport guy, whatever. But, like last time I threw before that, I think was probably in 7th grade when I threw the discus.
Man, you would have been a good discus thrower.
Maybe 8th grade.
How did you not end up doing that shit? You're 8 feet tall.
Well, so because I just
look European.
So Will might be able to attest to this, but when you have a throws coach, it's usually or like at that level especially, like it's normally like
there's 42 people throwing.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's basically the football coach, part-time wants to make more money in middle school. And they go out and they sit on the cooler and they just like watch you throw.
Make sure nobody gets hit.
Right. They basically bring a lawn chair, and they just kind of have everybody throw. They work them through it. Then in high school, I think I did it a little bit, but it was the same thing. Guy came out with a lawn chair, sat down, said go throw. No real instruction, no weightlifting. Basically went to a terrible school for it.
Coaching.
Yeah. Like in reality, I probably should have stuck with the wrestling and then gone to track. Just after that, but there just wasn't enough drive, I think, from the coach in that aspect. So I probably should have. I was okay. Yeah. Being longer limbed, I was 6'2" in 8th grade, so that's not bad.
Well, it's a recruitment problem, just
for sure.
Yeah. Just like some niche sports, particularly on the throwing side. A fast kid's not usually going to get through the cracks. He's going to run.
Right.
He or she will run. But
Plus, the basketball aspect, people are like, you got to play basketball, blah 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 blah. Right. Yeah. So I gave in to pressure, but I probably shouldn't have. But whatever.
Now's a great time to say that Dan German's dad was the first 7-foot basketball player in college basketball.
In the Big Ten.
Really? Big Ten, so.
Correct.
Oh, wow. Where?
Correct. Purdue.
Great school ever. Astronauts.
You might have heard of it.
Yeah, things like that. But in terms of throwing and exposure, this is what my regret. I didn't really see throwing until I got to Purdue. Purdue's really good at it, right? And my draw to it was I would help out with the throws just when the schedules aligned, and I really liked their demeanor in terms of training environment. Totally different from football or wrestling or something like that. Where, but they're more methodical. They understood timing. To me, it was really fun to work with those athletes.
Internally motivated.
100%, right? And so then I got curious. I would go out to practice and stop in, make sure they knew that I cared about them as an athlete, and then occasionally I'd go to meet or whatnot. And then sure enough, one day I'm out there on the field just getting beat. So
on the sledgehammer.
All right, but so that brings us pretty kind of walking through your story, and then at some point in the mix of all that, one of your former throwing buddies. Decided that you were going to get into this health and fitness industry and do your thing. Kind of how did that come about?
Yeah, so as 2008 Olympic trials were kind of coming up, we started talking about it really seriously in the few months before. He was already training people as a personal trainer out of a gym locally, and I had helped coach the track team and had helped coach the football team at one of the local high schools, and I was like, I think we could really get together and do some good stuff. He was getting a pretty successful personal training business for mostly adults and fat loss type people who, wanted to come in and lose weight. And he had been a thrower, 330 pounds, 500 pound bench press, 600 or 700 pound squat, all these like massive numbers, and it trimmed down to like 230, right? So people were like, well, how'd you do it? So he was getting a big like business for that, and I was making really good connections for sport performance and whatnot. And so we started sitting down, talking what we wanted to do. And as a thrower, we had been to all these all these weight rooms around the country. We've been to Texas, California, Oregon, all these different weight rooms because we'd usually, as a thrower, you'd go travel where you're going to go on a Wednesday, Thursday. You train there, and then you compete because you'd always do like a pre-meet lift. So we had this really clear idea of this is what a sport performance and training gym should look like. We should have turf, and we got to have it's really open and all this kind of stuff, which is kind of different from what a lot of people were doing at the time. So we started mapping out the plan and decided, all right, we're going to open in the fall of 2008, and went and secured some financing and all that kind of stuff, and started November 2008 with that gym. Opened the door with his 35 to 40 clients plus about 15 or 20 athletes. So we were pretty confident from the start that we were going to be pretty successful, right? We were going to be like, all right,
Good start.
Yeah, we'll be able to open the doors and pay the bills, right? So,
which is all you can hope for.
Yeah, right. And so that was the start of it. And it was like I always knew I wanted to be a coach because right after college, my first job was I actually got thrusted. I was an assistant track and field coach at IU. I was going to be a graduate assistant and go to grad school and all that kind of stuff. But the head coach, who was also the event coach, got fired. 3 weeks into the season, they were like, hey, before you start classes, why don't you just be the assistant coach? So I was like, oh gosh, this is like a dream job. I'll go start doing it right now. And then realized that the collegiate sector was not what I wanted to be a part of, right? Because it was like, when you do a lot of individual sports, you're really self-reliant on like your own ability to get things done, your ability to like seek out better ways and train harder and work harder and all that kind of stuff. And when I was in the collegiate sector, it was, and meet with this person, and meet with this person, and meet with this person. And at one point I looked and there was 18 athletic directors above us, plus the head coach. And I was like, what am I doing, right? So that was kind of the impetus. All right, I want to go make it on my own and see how I do.
Right. Let alone like the future of your career is determined on the success of 18 to 22-year-olds.
Right, exactly. And you're, and I got a real quick taste of it. They brought in a new head coach, and he brought his own staff with him. So within, a year, I was out of a job, and I was like, if I don't tie my wagon to somebody really good at the top, then I'm going to be moving all the time. So
yeah, for sure.
I believe there was a case at Purdue, I think, where there was a throws coach that was really good. I can't remember his name, but he went from like throws coach of the year, maybe the Big Ten, right? I think to fired.
Just couldn't get along with
out of the coaching world.
Yeah.
Just like fuck it, I'm done.
Yep.
You're the best in the country. We're gonna fire you, and you're never gonna come back.
Yeah, my collegiate strength coach, he was an assistant weightlifting coach, a guy named Jeff Eliason, really smart guy, great coach. Was our collegiate strength coach for the first 3 years I was at IU. He got the job of a lifetime. He's doing track and he's doing men's basketball at IU, which is a huge deal. And he gets that team to that year they went to the national championship game, 2002. And everybody's like, man, he's doing an amazing job. Look at how strong these guys are. Next year they have a bad year, and the head coach comes to him and says, why aren't my guys bench pressing more? Meanwhile, they've got guys they got 5 guys or 8 guys on the team cleaning 225 to 275, right? And their verticals are all up and all this kind of stuff.
You get shit about bench.
Yeah, and he gets fired because he gets taken off of basketball, demoted really. Because the coach had a bad year and wanted to blame it on a lack of bench pressing. Right? So I was like, I kind of saw that pretty quickly that collegiate's not where I wanted to go. I want to be the entrepreneur who gets the controls on success.
So what was it like when you decided, hey, we're going to do this? Kind of what was take people through like that experience. Like I've told people before, like that it's stressful and all the stuff, but until you live it, like you really don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's insane, like 5:30 a.m. to 9 p.m., right? Because you're open at 6, so you got to make sure everything's good. Get there early, stay till you close at 8. You're there for an hour cleaning up every Saturday, there from like 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. because I'm going to finally work out and I'm going to clean the place and everything. And then I'm 25 years old. So on Saturday evening, I go out to the bars.
And meet your future wife.
Yeah. And then Sunday off, and then you start back Monday. So it's like that. It's constant grind and just chasing after getting new clients, getting new people in the door. And it's tiresome, but it is that when you're an entrepreneur and you first start out, like it's really exciting, like that day when you get all the equipment in for the first time, you're building all the equipment yourself.
So new.
Yeah, and it's like the most exciting time, and then you're exhausted, right? But it's a lot of fun,
I always tell people like the building is my favorite part.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I'm saying? It's like that.
Yeah.
It's a little risky, So I think that, let's walk through this a little bit. Anytime I meet anybody in the weightlifting or sports performance community, and they ask where I'm from, I tell them from Indy, and tell them about Lift Lab, the whole thing, and they always ask, "Oh, do you know Will Flemming?" And first of all, they assume that our gyms are next door to each other. Like,
Indiana.
I'm like, yeah. I'm like, he's in Bloomington. I'm like, yes, I know him. Like, it's not too far away, but it's not like just down the street. And so, but that you've built that reputation over time as being a leader in the industry in terms of Olympic weightlifting and using Olympic weightlifting for sports performance. So what was it that got you on that track?
Well, from day one, one thing we kind of said was like, me and my business partner sat down and we were like, this is what the program's going to look like for athletes, right? They're going to start with Olympic lifts. We're going to really focus on that. We can teach it better than anybody else. So that was kind of like in there. And we were doing a lot of hang cleans, hang snatches, all that kind of stuff, and got some really, really strong kids in the gym. And that was just like, and I guess it was kind of revolutionary because I wasn't saying like it was too hard to teach at the time, right?
Which is the excuse.
Yeah, right. I was like, you take your time to teach, right, and then it'll pay off. And I relate that to my story of learning the Olympic lifts was, the first 6 weeks that I was with Paul and Frank, I had come in with like a 185-pound power clean, and so I was the strongest kid in my class. But they were like, no, you're going to do 50 kilos in the clean and jerk, and you're going to do 40 kilos in the snatch. And so I did that for 6 weeks, right? And then I did my first competition, and I did 65 in the snatch and 85 in the clean and jerk. And this was the first time I got to go heavy. And then, and that was like blind. They just said, you're going to take these today. And so I just did it, right? And then it was like 6 weeks to junior nationals, and I got to go, I still got to go heavier, but there's still some limits. And at junior nationals, I went 92 and a half and 115, right? So
Substantial.
Right, exactly. So it was like within 12 weeks, I went from never having snatched to snatching over 200 pounds in competition and having a really ugly clean at 85 kilos to 115 kilo clean and jerk, right? So I was like, you take your time and establish some really good technique, it'll pay off in the end. So we're saying, hey, come in and start, lifting with us. And so we start producing really good athletes. We had the good fortune, we already had some good athletes who were working with us periodically, shot putters, football players, and stuff like that. And continue to get really good athletes, basketball, all sorts of sports. At the time, I think we had 3 Indiana All-Stars on the basketball team one year and all that kind of stuff. So, and because of that, I got approached by a couple groups like, hey, would you teach the coaches in our organization how to do this? And so that started getting me more towards weightlifting. And then ultimately, like, I just had a kid who was like a soccer player, but 5'4", 5'5", 5'4", and he was going to quit playing soccer. And I was like, you hang clean 85 kilos for reps, and you're 15 years old, so you want to try this weightlifting thing? And gave him a spiel like, this is what I did, and here's how, here's what you do, and all that kind of stuff. And I took him to a competition to qualify him for the youth national championships, and he did, right? And he was my first kid that I took to a competition, and this is 2011 or something like that. So we'd been open for 3 years teaching kids how to lift, but not like competing. Yeah. And take him to a competition, and I can't remember how to count attempts. I was like learning all over. Yeah, and so like found a guy that I knew for a long time, Rufus, right? And I said, hey, Rufus, can you help me out? Rufus said, yeah, sure, I'll help you out. And so he qualifies, go to youth nationals, a couple months later.
Sure.
Like I'm thinking about how.
No, I did.
Go ahead. So I'm thinking it's kind of, I loved it. I love doing it, but I don't know if that's a big thing. One of the first things I ever did was I approached like a local high school and said, hey, can we run a weightlifting club out of your school? And they said no. And I was like, all right, cool. Right. And so it took off. But it was like, I was like a 5th year senior in college, and I was like, I'm going to see if I can start a weightlifting club. And nobody would let us do it. So I was like, all right, cool.
Sure. So when I was contemplating getting out of the collegiate setting, I just leveraged that status, right?
Yeah.
I coach at Purdue.
Yeah.
In everything I ever sent out in an email, like shamelessly, just because I was looking for answers. And so I had never met him, but Greg Everett at the time had trained my new boss's son out in California.
Okay.
So, and he was trained on my new boss's son. Ultimately started at USC. He's a phenomenal athlete. Ultimately started at USC as a slot type player. Okay. And then transferred to Notre Dame and ended up being running back. Okay. Very, very super talented guy. So anyway, I emailed Greg Everett, and I'm 100% sure he doesn't remember this. And I said, hey, I work at Purdue. I now work with Coach Carlisle. You coach your son Amir. I'm thinking about leaving. You mind if I ask you some questions? And it was all centered around. At that time, when I was at Purdue, I really wanted to make weightlifting more or less what it's becoming now. I really wanted to do that. But still in 2010, it was not popular. Yeah. It's still pretty small. Yeah, I mean, it's small today, but it's even smaller. Yeah. And I'll never forget, he was like, you can't do it. He's like, you literally cannot start a business built around weightlifting and expect to pay the bills. It's like, you're not going to do it.
Well,
he's like, do something else.
A ton. Me and him was like, being where he was around San Francisco, he's like, just to pay the bills, you have to have this and this and this and this, right? So a totally different economic position, right? He's like, I can't have a struggling weightlifter living here because they can't afford a rent.
Right.
They're going to have to work 80 hours a week.
Which, by the way, you know that Schenkel's place is in downtown San Francisco, super swanky, super.
It's like probably this big. We're standing in.
We had one of our guys went out there and tried to drop in. And it was like a $50 or $100 drop in fee, something like that. I was like, that makes sense for the area. But so anyway, in the process of that, moving out or getting out of Lift Lab, and then figuring out how I was going to do this transition period, I started in a corner of IFAST, which, it ended. It ended. Yeah. And in the midst of that, I drove down. I said, hey, Will, I'd like to come down and talk to you and ask you some things. And a lot of that was centered around, I wanted to do some of the things that you and one of the guys from IFAST was doing. And you politely said, I can't, right, because of this prior business relationship. And that was it was really a kick in the dick. But I remember driving back to Indy and thinking, I was having all kinds of thoughts. But we met, and that was in your old space, and it had the upstairs spot. Yeah. And you guys had written your some sort of
monthly
meeting.
revenue.
Yes, and monthly revenue was up there, and I saw the number of what you had done that month, and it was the number was 40,370. I just burned in my brain, and that was the total gross revenue. And I start doing the math. There's 2 guys that own it. They got 6 interns working here, 2 full-time coaches. They can probably pay the bills. You know what I mean? And I thought at that time, and I knew what the other place was doing the revenue, and you guys were just totally crushing. So I was like, you know what? Look, this may be a no. Greg Everett may think I can't do it. There may be people that are going to close the door, but I think it's possible, right? And I was super, inspired by that you guys were being successful doing the thing that I wanted to do, and kind of like laying that foundation for it. So thank you.
Hey, no
thank
problem.
You,
Sorry about
Will.
saying no.
I mean, hey, it happens. But you're, first of all, you're, to any young fitness entrepreneur out there, people are always going to fucking tell you no.
Yeah.
Like, it just happens over and over again, and it's going to be for whatever reason, for whatever business relationship, they don't like you. It's kind of part of it, and that's okay. Like, you're going to get some no's, and eventually you're going to get some yeses. It's just 100% 100% statistics.
Yeah.
You just got to keep asking, keep trying. So since that time, you and your partner have split.
Yep.
And it's cordless split from what I understand. And you are in a new facility,
Yep.
and you're doing new things, a lot of the same things. So you're
Yep.
still running group fitness, private training, sports performance, weightlifting.
Yep.
And now you're involved with making weightlifting shoes.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
So I got approached by a former thrower competitor of mine, a guy named Lyndon Reeder. And Lyndon had been in the collegiate sector. He'd been an extremely successful throws coach up at the University of Minnesota. Decided that it wasn't for him, like we've kind of a tradition in this podcast by this point, and decided it wasn't for him. The collegiate sector, and he wanted to go into making equipment, doing some stuff for track and field, and had this idea for a company. He calls me up and said, "Hey, what do you think? I want to make a weightlifting shoe. What do you think? What do you think it should look like?" And so we started bouncing ideas back and forth. And he's really graphically inclined, so he would kind of put together a mock-up and send it to me, and I'd say, "No, you got to tweak this and do this and all that kind of stuff." And started working on the process there. It's his company. I'm just like working with him as a consultant on this side, on the weightlifting shoe side of things. But it's been a really cool process because they're just going to be a small player that's going to make like what would look like a really cool craft and but also athletic kind of look. Wood heel weightlifting shoe, which is something that's, I think that some weightlifting heads would really like the nostalgia of it, right? They perform really well. So we just been testing we just got our first prototype, and I've been testing them for the last month or so, and then they go away, and that process it's long, right? Because you have a company that's going to actually do the manufacturing for you, and you send them ideas, and there was a period of time where it went from like rendering of a shoe that I was like, oh man, this is going to look really cool, to a foam model of a shoe, and you're like, oh no, this is
not what I wanted.
Yeah, and then
possibly lift weights in this.
Yeah, and then so at each stage, and so this for the stage that I just got was like, kind of basically the prototype. Not all the final materials and not all the final like, pieces manufactured for it. Almost some were handcrafted for this version, but turned out they're going to be really cool. So that's like that's just something I'm helping this guy out with. I think there's a market for another cool shoe out there. I know that Nike Weightlifting, thanks for sponsoring the podcast. They're doing a good job with their shoes, and Adidas has always done a great job with their shoes. And so, but I think there's a little spot for what we're going to put together.
Well, and this would be kind of the next segue, but think about it. Like even if you go back to 2010, like I remember trying to get weightlifting shoes from Dynamic, Alico, Fitness, and these dudes didn't take credit cards. Like you had
to fax them or call them and actually catch them.
Yes, it was like impossible.
Yeah.
And then it was very limited size, shape, color, those sort of things. It was just really hard to get gear. So I guess like the question I would put on you next is like, what do you think's next for the weightlifting / sports performance community? And just for a reference, I was thinking about the amount of like new weightlifting, and I'm not talking about like t-shirt brands, but like the new brands that are coming out, like this weightlifting shoe, for example. Virus is coming into the weightlifting scene. They've been in the MMA scene for a long time. What do you think the future is?
I think that probably the mistake is the lifestyle brand, right? There are some lifestyle brands that are making it and doing awesome.
There's like 5.
Yeah, right. And they're
5.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But then everybody.
So there's 30,000 that
all the new like 2-part this and this.
Right.
I still think on the, do you ever listen to the Jug Life podcast? This is a shout out to Chad, but they always do like a spoof lifestyle brand.
No.
The best one was milligrams and kilograms. The more you take, the more you make, which I thought was just hilarious. But anyway,
that is good. So that's a mistake. Like that's just going to be a money hole. Somebody's going to sell.
Sure.
A successful company in there might sell 100 shirts. I don't know, right? And but there is room for people who are like innovating with something cool or bringing a new like actual thing to market, right? An actual product that is designed and crafted, where instead of just something that's stamped on there.
Sure.
Right? So I think that there's, what is there really, right? right? Shoes.
You see, I remember,
Sleeves,
so
singlet.
SBD, which is a powerlifting brand, right, per se. I mean, knee sleeves are knee sleeves within rules and regulations. But I remember SBD at whatever the Washington, D.C. meet was. That was an American Open.
Yeah, a couple years ago.
Yeah. They had, but remember that they had the powerlifting thing
Oh,
there
yeah.
too. So it's like you went through and it was like all powerlifting brands and then all weightlifting brands. And I remember the SBD booth was like empty.
Yeah.
And the powerlifting people like more or less begging people to go back there and give them some money because they paid God knows how much for a booth at that time.
Yeah.
Right? And I was just like, huh. And I was thinking about it. And now like the brand's totally taken off. And if you look at the growth of powerlifting, it's decreasing, but they're still selling a lot of products and supplies.
Yeah.
And then it kind of gets me along the thought of, okay, could we have a culture shift in the U.S. where you're not necessarily selling like two competitive weightlifters, but you are selling like two people that want to have that as part of their lifestyle.
Yeah.
So, for example, Nike started making running shoes, not necessarily for the competitive marathoners,
Yeah.
but for people that were going to
Exactly.
recreationally run.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What are the things that the recreational lifter needs? They're going to need shoes and
Right.
yeah,
Belt straps,
Well,
right?
that's a-
So, but you're having the community, you're having the community shift, or you can have a cultural shift where they're going towards things that are more strength oriented.
Yeah.
Strength oriented than running oriented or
Yeah.
cardiovascular oriented or whatever. So they may not necessarily be competing in the sport of weightlifting,
Yeah.
but they're still participating
Yeah.
in weightlifting. So plenty of room there.
You guys want to take this mobile outside?
I think Wilson. I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover in the podcast. Is there anything you would like for me to answer?
Oh gosh. So when will this come out?
Friday.
Friday, probably.
All right. So tell me about your guys' plan because you guys have 35 or 34 weightlifters.
Okay,
34.
So at the American Open Series 3, we're going to have 34, 35 weightlifters.
Do we have anybody who's not a weightlifter watching this? Because this is mind blowing. Right?
You would actually be surprised. The most comments come from people that are not.
Okay.
Not
So non-weightlifters.
a lot. This is
is
a lot of lifters.
This is like, is it masochistic or sadistic? Which is
It's
masochistic.
masochistic.
It's all of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But basically, the game plan is to not die.
Okay.
Survive.
And I think
What's his 5-year plan? Not die?
right, exactly. Because the Masters lifters on the roster for this, that is their 5-year plan. But if worst case scenario is we're going to run everybody's warm-up attempts on time, not on attempts out.
Yeah.
So we can do a good job of gauging like the pace of the meet and then have each lifter with a sheet, with a stopwatch, and we can bounce back and forth. That's worst case scenario, and it's only going to occur during a couple sessions. But the big thing will be, what people don't understand managing that amount of lifters is the emotional ups and downs.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you get amped up for everybody's session twice for when they snatch and they clean and jerk.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to multiply that over, 70-fold.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not only physically exhausting from just being on your feet all day on 12-hour days, but then like the emotional roller coaster that goes with it.
Yeah.
So that's like the other aspect of it that people don't consider. However, when I started Lift Lab, my goal was to grow the sport of Olympic weightlifting in Indiana. So this is something that I asked for. So it's going to be hard, but it's
Totally
like
ready.
exactly. I'm really thrilled for it, and I'm thrilled that the team score allows for all classes and divisions to be even. Okay, so when we put our team score in, some of our top point scorers will be masters.
That's good.
And I think this is actually a great move by USA Weightlifting because it encourages participation across all age groups.
That's really cool. Well, good luck.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Wilson, where can they find you?
At Will Flemming with 1 L on Instagram is probably the best place to find me. My gym is sportsbloomington.com.
I love it.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you.